Let me do this one as well.
For this one. Your own time.
Hi.
Hello, yes, we are on, we're on. Hi, it's Jeff and Paul here, and you can probably tell by the background noise that we are back live in a real English pub.
And it's lovely, isn't it?
It's gorgeous. Lovely. It's a lovely day. It's a bit cold, a bit windy, and we're outside because we're still not allowed inside, but still, we have a real pint of beer, or did have, finished it now, and a pint of cider in our hands, and we had a great time talking about cameras on, cameras off. So, welcome back to a real in-person Agile podcast. We hope you enjoy it, and we will see you again soon. Cheers.
Play the jingle. Take my silly hat. Glasses on, or this way. Are we on?
We're on. Look at this.
Look at that. We can actually. I was going to say we can clink, but we can't clink.
Plastic
glasses.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Let me just put this on as well.
Well, it's tangy. Not fruity tangy, but.
So I've bought Jeff. I bought Jeff a mystery pint. He doesn't know what it is. Let's say where we are first, and I can explain the pint.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
So we are now face to face in Bristol, in the Harbourside area, Redcliffe. This is a pub called the Ostrich, and it's a Butcombe pub, and Butcombe that's a local brewer, isn't it? I think
it's a very big popular brewery now.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it might have even been bought out.
Has it?
I think it's been bought out recently by one of the bigger ones. But I might be wrong.
Let me tell you what I bought. So you're drinking Butcombe Stateside IPA, which is 4.2% ABV.
Mm-hmm.
A punchy session IPA made from the best of American and English hops. A refreshing transatlantic marriage of citrus, resinous aromatics and malty bite with a hoppy finish.
Punchy's a good word, actually.
Is punchy a good thing?
Yeah. In a drink.
In what way? Describe what you mean by punchy.
So,
someone who doesn't.
I'll say zingy.
So
the first thing that came to me, but not fruity.
Not fruity.
A non-fruity zing.
Okay.
That's the best way of describing it. It's not. It is quite cold. Probably colder than I think it
should be.
Yeah.
But
which can limit the flavours a little bit. But yeah, I mean there is a little bit of confirmation bias going on here. But it does. I would have said it was an IPA definitely, and I would have said it was probably somewhere between sort of an English and American one. So the fact that it's mixed English and American hops makes sense. But I might just be
drinkable.
Oh yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Session ale.
No, I think it will get more drinkable as it becomes. I would say room temperature, but not quite because we're not in a room. But yeah, for those of you that can't see us, we are actually outside by. Is that a river or a canal?
Is
it the River Avon?
It's the river, isn't it? I think it must be.
Yeah. Yeah. In Bristol.
Beautiful. It's a sunny day.
Not particularly warm.
No,
but beautiful.
It's May, so we're having a very odd April-May, aren't we, in this country, which is sunny but cold. So.
You've got the classic situation where parents are walking by, their kids are wearing shorts or dresses, and the parents are wearing coats, hats, and gloves.
Yeah, it's quite unusual.
But
it's just nice to be back at an establishment other than our house and our gardens.
So I'm drinking a Stateside IPA, and you're drinking some kind of orange squash. very diluted.
It's my favourite. It's Thatcher's Haze, with a little dash of lemonade in it.
A dash? You sure?
Yeah.
Looks more like lemonade with a dash of cider to me. But
it's nice. But it's refreshing. I was thirsty, so I'm having a thirst quencher.
Good.
But yeah,
that's a pretty good picture on the old iPhone there, because I've actually damaged the first time I've ever damaged one of my phones.
Oh, I can
not
see
on
it.
the front.
Oh.
On the back. One of the lenses is damaged. Obviously, it's not using that because it's sort of the front-facing camera. But yeah, the first time ever I've damaged it. It's a good few years old, this one now. But
How did you do that?
I don't know actually. I'm going to blame it on the toddler because he has been
easy
taking
excuse.
my phone, mine, and running off with it, thinking it's funny, and then just throwing it. But I'm not one of these. I don't have a screen protector. I don't have a case either. I just carry it around. I like the feel of the actual phone.
Yeah. You do leave yourself open to that kind of damage, don't you?
But, it's a good day for cameras on, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I'm a lot more comfortable with it now. I'm a lot less conscious of it when you say cameras on, but in terms of work stuff. So I was doing.
That's just a phrase now, isn't it? Cameras on. For me, sorry.
It's become part of the lexicon.
Yeah, it's just one of those phrases. You're on mute. Cameras on.
I still get people that it doesn't work, and they can't understand why it doesn't work.
What? Turning the camera on
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Like a peripheral thing, they don't understand why their camera's not working.
Do you think that's?
And
the
that's
case?
immensely frustrating. I think it genuinely is. It's certainly the case yesterday. I had it yesterday, and there was a little bit of uncomfortable kind of waiting for someone to discover that, because you think it's a bit more obvious. And someone else on the call said, just checking, is there a button in the bottom left that says, has it got a red line through it saying camera off? Just to make sure it's not something obvious, which again sounds a little bit patronising, but I think in this case, genuinely, it was something wasn't working properly. But
Yeah.
it was just really odd because it was a call. There was 5 of us on it, and one person didn't have their camera on.
And was that through choice or through technical?
Through technical.
Through technical problems. I did. I was speaking at a conference yesterday.
Yeah.
And over 250 people or something, and the cameras there. But in the chat, I was chatting to a couple of people, a little bit, trying to recreate some of the sort of hallway conversations, bar conversations type things,
Yeah.
little private Slack messages in the group or what have you. And he says, yeah, I'm really busy today. I'm here, but I've got my camera off so people can't see that I'm multitasking. I said, well, you're at a conference, mate. No one's really paying that much attention to you if you're an attendee. No offence.
Yeah.
But I can't really do that if I'm speaking.
No, exactly. Yeah.
But it's a big topic. Something that I get asked a lot about is how do you get people to turn their cameras on because people don't want to. It seems to be a massive thing for people. Do you get that?
I think less now. I think it's become more of a conversation people are prepared to have. I know some companies that have literally mandated it. They've said by default, they've literally broadcast it saying by default as a company we are cameras on. Unless you've got a very good excuse, the cameras should be on for any meeting you're in.
Okay. How well does that go down?
I think, nobody vocalised any. This was a private company, and I was teaching them a course, so they all turned up straight away. Cameras were on, and they were fine with it but they were quite an open company. But I think I can imagine it might be quite difficult for. I notice it more on meetups. Meetups are harder, and it's perhaps less. You can't really force it there. That's purely a choice.
It's a voluntary thing, isn't it? I think forcing it is a really dangerous area. I did a workshop for an organisation on retrospectives recently, and sent people off into breakout rooms and to do a little bit of exercises and things. And while I was in one of the breakout rooms, only one of the people had their cameras on, 2 or something like that. And they asked me about it. So this is just standard. People just don't want to do it. It really frustrates me. Why? It just reduces the amount of bandwidth, it reduces the amount of trust, it reduces the amount of collaboration. It really just reduces the effectiveness of all the meetings we have, especially things like retrospectives. How do you get people to turn their cameras on? And I said, well, I'm not being funny, but I think that says more about, and I get that, because if I'm facilitating, or even when I'm talking at a conference, I know certain things go through my mind, but they're my own insecurities. Are people listening? Are people there? What are people saying about me? You know, are people
Yeah, that's
writing
fair.
notes in class about me? You know, that kind of thing. And it's all going with my own insecurities. And so doesn't that really say more about us as facilitators than those people?
Yeah, possibly.
And you know, if we're really worried about it, let's put more of our energy into working out what would make that a no-brainer for people than worry about how do I convince them to do it. You know, I don't want people to put their camera. If I had the choice, I absolutely would. If there was a button there that said everyone wants to put their cameras on, I would push that button. All right.
Yeah.
I would, because I think it is a good thing.
Yeah.
Actually, not completely. I'll come back to that. But what I don't want is I don't want people to put their cameras on because they feel they have to. I don't really, as a rule, I don't want anyone to do anything just because they have to. I want them to want to do stuff. That's kind of a general thing for me. And, do you
All right,
remember?
then, what's the different situation there? So I've coming at this from let's be deliberate on this. Not a facilitator, but as a trainer.
Yeah.
Where you have a duty to, and me as an example, and you as an example, we're certified trainers. We have to. Part of our mandate as a trainer is to ensure that people are actively participating.
Yeah.
Can you realistically assess active participation without a camera?
Well, this is going to sound very picky, but there are two things I've got with that question. One is, just because I've got their camera on, does that mean I can guarantee they're actively participating? And secondly, does actively participating actually mean they're learning? Not necessarily. So there are other ways that I can ensure, when I'm training, I don't do a lot of it, but when I'm training, my goal, I think, is to make sure that the learning objectives have been met. People have got what they've come for. Not that they're necessarily participating, because they could be participating and not learning. I'd rather have them learn and not participate out of the two. But equally, just by having their camera on doesn't guarantee that they're going to participate. So there are different ways that I can check that. If checking it is important to me, there are different ways that I can check. I could give them a test afterwards. I could have a one-to-one conversation with them afterwards. I could get them to do an essay debrief on what they got from the course.
Yeah.
Lots of different ways that I can check that without them actually participating. And if they don't want to participate, again, my first thought is I haven't set that up well enough for them to want to participate or feel safe to participate. Do you remember we did a crossover episode not long after the first lockdown?
With
We've done so many. We were talking about training. Two of the PSTs.
Bubs. Was it no?
Yes, Jeff and Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff and Jeff.
Jeff. That's it. And they had a rule which was, unless you've got good bandwidth and you're good enough to have your camera on without interruption, then you can't come because you would reduce the quality of interaction and learning for everybody else. And I get that. But we also had a conversation about how that's quite a privileged stance to take.
It's discriminating against people that don't have bandwidth.
Yeah, and there's lots of reasons why I might not feel comfortable saying I'm not comfortable having my camera on. Do you know what I mean? So there's lots of reasons why I might not be comfortable having my camera on, but there's also reasons why I might not be comfortable saying I'm not comfortable because of what it implies. Yeah. We had a great thing the other day. So one of my I've got this little clubhouse thing that I've got, and we had a session with Stuart. And you were there, so I'm telling you, you know this. You might have dropped out, but
No, I was there.
Lloyd, you know,
Camera's on. I was there.
Yeah, camera's on. So Lloyd, one of our guys, he regularly joins. And his screen name is Rachel, which is his daughter. And Stuart doesn't know this. We know this because.
Is it always Rachel?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whenever he signs in.
Yeah. And we know this, so we know not to call him Rachel. Sometimes we call him Rachel as a joke, but Stuart didn't know this. He just said Rachel. And Lloyd said, by the way, I'm Lloyd, I'm not Rachel. At which point Rachel puts her face in front of the screen and says, I'm Rachel!
His daughter did it. Hilarious.
Absolutely fantastic. She is a star in the making. And Lloyd said, yeah, she's well known of jumping into my calls now. I just think that's brilliant.
It is, yeah.
I absolutely think that's brilliant. I don't know where I was going with that.
But if people are fearful that might happen, that might be a reason that they don't want. They're trying to exclude what's going on behind them from, and I can absolutely empathise with that. But my point is, I think that as this pandemic's gone on and as we've become more accustomed to having to deal with it, because you see it on television, you see it on the media of politicians trying to work at home and their kids walking into shots, their cats walking across their keyboard and all these things. So we're used to it, we're not surprised by it anymore, and I think it just makes us all a bit more human when we see it.
I've seen more than my fair share of cat buttholes over the last 12 years.
Tails walking across the screen.
But no, we do. Things become more normalised. We become more comfortable with it. We become more desensitised to some of the stigma. And actually, over time, a lot of the quite often our unconscious assumptions and fears about it are alleviated just through doing and practicing and observing and seeing that, you know what, the worst doesn't happen. It's not always a good thing. I did say that, didn't I? So yesterday my talk was on simplicity.
Yeah.
And one of the things I talked about was, from a coaching perspective, I actually came up with a new word last night, which I wish I came up with yesterday.
Created a new word.
I did. By contact.
Okay.
Right, because we're looking at each other, we're looking at each other's eyes, right? But when we're on a screen, I might be looking at your eyes, but you don't know that I'm looking at your eyes, and you're not looking at my eyes. You're looking at the camera. And what I find is I spend more time looking at myself.
Yeah.
On the screen, so we don't have this bi-directional eye contact or bi contact that you would normally have, and so it's kind of false anyway. You don't really get that connection that you say we get the better bandwidth, but you're not really getting the rapport building of it. Anyway, a slight digression, because the main thing is around simplicity. And so, from a coaching perspective, sometimes I find myself trying to overcomplicate things. Just in a one-to-one session, just forget about listening and just active listening, and think, I'm going to use some fancy, sexy coaching tool here, or some fancy, I need to earn my stripes, prove my worth as a coach and show them what I'm made of. And it almost always is less effective than if I just go back to basics. But going even further back to basics, some of the one-to-one coaching that I did with a client so towards the end of the summer, especially when it was really, really hot. Do you remember that? Really hot, really heat wave. Being in my shed in the afternoon was just horrendous. Some of the people that I was coaching said, so fed up with Zoom. I said, well, how about we just go back to like a phone call? So I stuck my AirPods in, and they stuck their headphones on, and they took their dog for a walk, and I went out for a walk, and we just had our coaching session. We couldn't see each other, and I found myself listening a lot more intently than I would have been if we'd have had the cameras on. And the movement and just being outside added an extra dimension. I think that actually cameras off can force us to focus a lot more on the important stuff. And I think, to some degree, our desire for cameras on is kind of an excuse, a coping mechanism to hide our insecurities.
Okay. On that, so I'm going to throw another example in there, because what you said there made me think about something. So I did an improv class yesterday, and one of the well-known improv games is one-word storytelling. We did one-word storytelling, and like I said from the beginning, one person didn't have a camera that was working, so we've got 5 people, one person camera off, so we have to use our ears. So one-word storytelling is a listening game. If you've never played it before, basically the group of people in a circular fashion tell a story, but tell it one word at a time. You've got to listen intently to the word. So we had the added dimension that 2 of the 5 were not native English speakers.
Okay.
So, and one of those didn't have the camera was working. So you don't have visuals. You've purely got audio, and you've got someone whose English isn't strong as the other 3 or the other 4.
And for the benefit of the tape, Paul is now talking with his hands as well.
I am using
which
my
I can
hands.
see. Right? Which with the cameras off you can't.
Yes.
Go on.
So, we're trying to play one-word storytelling, and what I find myself doing, even though this doesn't make any difference, is I was trying to listen by putting my you can't see on the camera, but I'm putting my ear closer to my computer,
right?
Which of course then completely is terrible if you're looking at me. I'm doing this.
Yeah, I don't want to see it inside.
You don't want to see it inside my ear, but for some reason I found that easier, because that's, I suppose, muscle memory. I'm trying to get my ear closer to something I'm listening to, but I'm less focused on eye contact. And then I notice other people doing it as well. So it's an interesting when you force listening. And I think I also noticed it as well when you squint. You notice sometimes you squint when you're listening.
Yeah.
So that's to reduce your eye, your vision, to try and amplify your hearing more.
Yeah.
So it's interesting things like that, I think, and it comes back to a point you mentioned there around you're conscious of yourself. Not many people know this, but there is a setting in Zoom that you can switch off self-view. So basically, I read something around Zoom fatigue saying that a lot of people get much more conscious of what they're looking at themselves, not looking at everyone else, and they're conscious of what they look like on screen. So you can, it's hard to find, but there is a setting in Zoom you can select that off, and apparently that helps. So then you become less conscious of what your people are seeing from you. You're more just focused on what people you're looking at of other people.
Yeah. That's something I'm going to do a lot more of, actually.
Hide yourself.
Yes. I do. It's not because I like looking at myself. I think it's a self-conscious thing.
I think you're right, because
am I looking silly? Have I done something? Is something else in shot? Is someone going to think I'm unprofessional or whatever?
And I've seen a lot of that in terms of online training. That I'm not discrediting any of the trainers that do the same job as you and I, and they've made a very professional job of it. But their camera view is their shop window. So
true.
When they're selling a course or when they're promoting a course, they've got their kind of logo, green screen behind them, and they might have them perfectly central in frame. And I think for on-demand video style training, absolutely, you want that kind of professional image. But personally speaking, I am conscious that things I haven't got, the laundry being done behind me. But I'm less, because I used to put posters up and stuff behind me to make it look like this is the professional, but I don't do that anymore. I've become much more comfortable with an office background rather than just, I don't green screen, I don't hide it at all. So. But yeah, I think I can see that a lot of trainers in our area would want to make that look like a very clean, professional image.
Yeah. I have to say, for me, I think maybe it's just because this has been at the front of my mind recently anyway, on a number of different topics. It comes back to trust.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I've got teenage kids who have been homeschooling, and I've been learning the tricks of people, taking a screenshot or creating a looped GIF and putting that as their virtual background.
Really?
So they can disappear and look like they're working. So I'm aware that there are tricks that can be played, but ultimately there's this starting with, do we trust our people? Do we trust that they want to do a good job? And if we don't, then we're going to be worried. We're going to be suspicious. And if we do, then we don't really need to worry too much about what's going on. You mentioned something a while ago, I think, this idea of how important it is to have a check-in.
Yeah.
Certainly at the start. We've always been fans of check-in anyway, but even more so when you're virtual, because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about whether we should have maybe just almost like a middle ground, almost like a short time-boxed period of cameras on. And then if you want cameras off, go cameras on. But just come in, say hi, have a look round, get the curiosity out of the way, put a face to a name, look each other in the eye.
This is what's going on behind me right now.
This is me, this is where I am. And now I'm just going to do cameras off.
I think we are inherently nosy as well. So I think part of us, you mentioned around trust and being self-conscious, but I think there's an element of, it's interesting, when you can see a lot going on in the background, it's like, oh, that's interesting. I see you've got some vinyl there.
Trying to read the books on the shelf, aren't you?
Yeah, and you're trying to say, you into what type of music you into, and we are. I think so. I can see that some people just wouldn't want people to poke into their lives and just leave that behind.
Do you still change the message on your whiteboard?
No, I don't do that anymore. So, yeah, for those of you who might have been on a Zoom call with me, I've got a whiteboard in the background. which makes it like it's a prop mainly. I never very rarely use it. There's a few post-its on it, but I used to write little messages on it for Jeff or Nigel if we were signing into a call, just to see if anyone noticed what was written in the background.
This is an aside, but this is where my mind went, thinking you could put some messages on there saying, you know, if you're reading this, piss off, you nosy.
Yeah.
But that then led my mind to this thing that I saw about how a really good way to get your own back, if you like, on some really frustrating person at work or something, is to write some really rude words in your email reply, but then turn them in white ink so you can't see them. You know they're there,
Yeah.
but don't ever see them. That sense of just getting your own back. Anyway, that's a complete aside. But that starting with trust thing, I think, is a big thing. And I think a lot of I've said this before, the organisations that have really more than just survived the pandemic, but have actually done well, are the ones that really did believe in the positive side of human nature. Actually believed in what they were saying about, we value our people, we trust our people, we empower our people, because they were forced to put their money where their mouth was, and the organisations that didn't have regressed. You know, they put in tracking software, or but you told me that was a Zoom feature, wasn't it? Did Zoom have a tracking feature?
It used to be. That was one of the big problems that people had. I think they had to remove it in the first few versions of Zoom, where you could basically track active screen time. So if people scrolled off from if Zoom was no longer the active window, it was basically Big Brother. You could kind of watch what people were doing on their machines at home. But it was removed due to for obvious reasons.
Well, I'd like to think that they realised it had unintended uses. I don't think that was the intention behind it, and they realised that it was an unhelpful feature to collaboration. So, going all the way back to this person I was having a conversation with about this in this retrospective workshop. She said she's a really big thing. She said, is it bigger for you than big for them?
Yeah.
And she said, just doesn't work. All right, retrospectives just don't work if you have your cameras off. And I said, I can completely I know where you're coming from, and if I had the choice, I would do that. But can you imagine the scenario where you could have a retrospective, everybody's camera was off, and it was still successful? She said, no, can't imagine that scenario. I said, okay. If I told you that I've been a part of one, would you believe me? And she said, I'd give you the benefit of the doubt, but I'd be suspicious. I said, okay, all right. We don't really know each other very well. I said, well, let me put it another way then. If you had a team of blind people, could you have a successful retrospective? Yeah. And she said, I suppose so. And that idea of, we've sort of that privilege again, isn't it? We have the privilege of sight, we have the privilege of cameras, but it's not a necessity. And that this idea of remote first, the first thing that most organisations did was try and replicate the physical office in an online environment, rather than designing for a remote first world. And I think back to some of my experiments, my attempts at trying to facilitate meetings, this is before the pandemic, with remote teams, trying to run retrospectives where people weren't present. And I give myself some credit, thinking, well, I didn't really know any better, I did the best that I could. But trying to put, I put pictures of people in the room in empty seats so that they weren't forgotten.
Yeah.
And that was the best that I could do. I thought it was the best I could do at the time. I'm sure I could do better now. But that sense of, well, are we actually thinking, designing for the lowest level of bandwidth? Because the others that have more capacity can catch up. Or they should be adapting. And it reminds me of what you said about the comedy store players when they have a guest.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing, right?
Yeah.
You've got someone coming into an established team who know the routine, who know the environment, who know, they're very comfortable with things. They've got all the bandwidth, they've got all the in-jokes, they've got all the banter and the history and stuff, and you've got someone completely new. You don't expect them to match up and meet you where you are.
Yeah.
You meet them where they are.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a sign of, I see that in really good teams. I see that in really good organisations. And it's not a patronising thing. It's not a paternalistic type thing. It's a genuine, this is the best result for us.
So I think you're right. I think so. This came up a while back with a different. Someone was mentioning, we're talking about a conversation with a group of different people. Have you heard of Discord?
Yes.
So now I've never used it, but I've heard again people that have dropped, not completely, but I prefer occasionally using Discord just because it's a more natural conversation. It's purely audio. There's no video element, but Zoomed and Teams does very subtle things on for clarity. It's to try and mute microphones or curb microphone sound when one person is speaking, so it's clearer for other people, which makes sense. But that does make it a much less natural audio conversation. Apparently, I've not used it, but Discord is purely, it's just open, bandwidth, I suppose, open. That was one thing that stood out for me. And I was going to mention something else, but it's gone. Oh, the other thing you say about can you do retrospectives? I think it would be I've not tried this, but I'm doing a remote, completely audio only retrospective. If you've got a tool that you can see on screen, but you can't see each other, I think that's completely possible. With visual tools like Miro and Mural, you've got that bandwidth. And it made me think of something we've talked about years back, but have never done it, which is in London. Isn't there a restaurant that's completely in the dark?
Yeah.
You've been there? Ever been there?
Haven't. No.
But that you think, well, how can that work? But it must work because it's a business.
And it heightens your other senses.
And it heightens your other senses. So I think you wouldn't open a restaurant if people weren't going to talk to each other in the dark, because you have to talk to each other in the dark.
That's part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and it forces you to focus less on what people look like and what they're doing, but more on what they're saying and how they're saying it. So I think there is an element of a beauty to that, a benefit to that, rather than seeing it as a drawback.
I'll throw a different perspective on the whole multitasking thing, and say that I know that I do get tempted to multitask. Bit of a type A person, don't like dead time, don't like waste, like to get on with things. And if I sense there's an opportunity for me to do two things at once, then I tend to find myself doing it before I realise.
Yeah.
But actually, if I know that I'm on camera, there's a little bit of social pressure on me not to do that. And that's, I think if I'm honest with myself, I think that's a helpful thing. But if I'm not aware of it, then I might avoid it.
Yeah. I had one guy on a course. He was very open at the beginning. He said, look, just to explain my setup at home. He basically walked us through his camera setup. So I've got my iPad here or whatever. I think I've got you looking at you on my iPad, but I've got my machine here. So if it looks like I'm looking at this terminal, it's because I'm looking at your Miro board.
Okay.
I'm not doing something else. He was basically saying, this is how I'm going to look.
Yeah.
It might not look like I'm looking at the camera, but I am working with you. So.
It was genuine rather than a double bluff.
Yeah, I think it was genuine. Yeah, and I think that's for me. That's also, you mentioned about remote checking. I think that could be a nice thing to explain. I had one woman who's basically said, if you hear the washing machine come on, it's because I'm sat in the same room as the washing machine. That's because her setup at home, she was basically working. Her office was a utility room at home. So, just telling people where you are and what's going on around you, just perhaps increases that level of safety, and people can empathise with you a little bit more about what if you do have to turn your camera on. I know the lady that said, I've got a sick daughter today, she's off school, so if I have to turn my camera off, it's not because I'm not listening or watching, it's because I've had to deal with my daughter who needs my attention. So again, I do feel a little bit like people have to justifying it, but equally I think it's quite nice that people feel confident enough to share what's going on, their habitat, what's going on at home for them at the moment.
I did see I saw a really funny thing. We might bleep this out, I don't know. I did see a funny thing from one team recently and it was their own working agreements, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
a company-wide thing. It was just a team thing. And they said it was a poster that they had as part of their team working canvas, and it said, "Your smartphone is like your genitals. If you're playing with it in the meeting, you will be asked to leave." But
I like that. It's good. Yeah.
On this note, I mean, we are far and away not the experts on this topic.
No.
You know, I mean, there's some really good people out there who this is something that they specialise in, and you know, Mark Kilby, Johanna Rothman did great stuff, great book on this. Kirsten Placey, J. Alan Morris, who Esther recommended.
Okay.
In our prestigious pint. I actually got the chance to go to their session yesterday as part of the conference that I was speaking at. Brilliant. They've done a great book, and equally they've got some free Google Slides, which are great templates that they share with people to use in meetings to help the remote facilitators. Malou Tsakarelli, Remote Forever, does great stuff on remote. That's been her thing for years. So there's loads and loads of good stuff out there. But I think it all comes down to trust and communication, doesn't it? Just having that, like you said, that guy just explained, this is my setup. I think that's just brilliant.
Yeah. Just to, especially if it's the first time you've met someone online or whatever. But I do a lot of my. In some respects it's easier, and this is just one of the benefits of having Zoom, is that. So I've got a little piece on my website. Basically, people can book 15 minutes of my time, and I'm pretty sure you've done something similar on yours. But basically, you can say no obligation, just to chat, just to see if there's anything I can do to help. 15 minutes, but they can basically coordinate their diary with mine.
Yep.
There's no awkward conversation. There's no cold call, which I think a lot of people are quite fearful of. Well, it's just me, but I don't get many phone calls these days because I think a lot of people are just organising that kind of contact through Zoom or Teams or whatever. But maybe that's a bad thing, you know. Like you said, sometimes a phone call, even though iPhones aren't particularly great at phone calls sometimes, but sometimes it's quite odd to have a conversation on the phone, and maybe we've got worse at that.
Maybe. I don't think we were particularly brilliant at it either, but
No.
I still think it will.
But it's getting to a situation now, which we've talked about this before, but there's not going to be many landlines left.
No.
Can you remember the last time you picked up a landline and made a phone call? Do you do it at home or do you use a mobile?
No, my landline doesn't work at home.
Doesn't it? See, that's weird, isn't it?
Not really.
There was time, but you remember we used to work at BT where
I grew up in a house where actually my landline at home was a payphone, so if I wanted to phone my friends, I had to pay. I just think 50p and speak to my mates.
But we worked at BT, and as you can imagine, when we started work at BT, every desk had a phone. You took pride in the fact I've got a phone number. We have our own direct line phone number.
It's a status symbol, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was like, I can program my phone. I've got my number saved in my phone, but it's on my desk. When my phone's ringing, for me, it's important. Look how important I am. When I went to Nokia, no phones, and I was a bit, hang on a minute. So I'm going from BT to Nokia, and I was looking at the desks are all empty. Where's the phones? They say, oh no, just use your mobile. Obviously, you're working for Nokia, you're all given phones, and it's just complete. And I think we're obviously going that way now. That there's just no the simplicity, the clarity you get on a landline telephone is somewhat disappearing.
Well, there's the whole technology side of things. So amazingly, our network is still quite old-fashioned.
Yeah.
I saw the other day that people are getting spoofed now because caller ID is easy to fake because we don't have IP.
Yeah.
Voice over IP, and also it's a privilege thing, right? My gran, all right, she's 90 whatever. She uses Netflix and stuff, but she still likes a landline.
Yeah.
She still doesn't want to speak on a mobile.
Yeah.
And it's not easy for everybody. Just because it's easy for the majority doesn't mean it's easy for
No,
everybody.
that's very true.
And that's something that's hard to. It's just something that should be taken into account, right? In these days of inclusivity and awareness, but it should force, I think, this change in working habits should force an improvement in infrastructure.
Yeah.
Both sort of civic local and national government level, but also from a company perspective, right? So like Nokia gave you a mobile. If you're going to work for a company, they should be providing you the tools. It's actually a legal responsibility in this country to provide you the tools to be able to do that. And so that should be. It'll take time. It'll take time, but I think it's going to accelerate. It already has accelerated, I'm sure. People have been working again with a very large national company. Their leadership team, quite a lot of them were still working from their bedrooms. 9 months into pandemic without a desk.
Yeah.
And you think that's something that as a company I wouldn't want my people to have to deal with.
Especially when you consider a lot of large companies are going to be saving a lot of money on travel because people aren't moving around. Leasing and ownership of commercial premises, which that's God knows what's going to happen to all these buildings in London that are going to be empty because you can't see many people going back into those offices. So yeah, there's a lot of companies have financially saved a lot of this when they should be reinvesting in allowing people the flexibility to work wherever they need to.
A lot of them are.
Oh yeah.
I did a talk with Claire Donald at Agile Mauritius recently, the future of work, and some of the stuff that that Claire's doing and these other companies are doing is actually quite exciting. All right, it's probably a little bit science fiction, some of it, but I think some of it is amazing and actually will happen, and it will be better off as a society for it. Anyway, that seems like a positive note to finish, and my plastic glass is empty.
I'm not a big fan of plastic glasses, unnecessarily, for many reasons.
No. Well, I'm going to put a little teaser out there and say I might be doing something about that. But anyway, that'll do for another day. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Till next time.
Cheers.